Now, okay, that's an historical perspective, but it matters today too. Just put yourself in the position of the Greeks, if you can, today. All right, the Greeks have got huge problems. Nobody in Greece pays any tax, and the black economy is absolutely enormous. We know that. But the Greeks are stuck inside this mistaken and quite a madhouse, frankly, of the euro. They're stuck inside a currency that is massively, massively overvalued for them. And there's nothing they can do, because they're locked inside an economic prison. They're trapped inside the euro. And the Greeks have already begun to realise that it doesn't matter who you vote for. It's irrelevant whether the Conservatives or the Socialists form the Greek government, because there's nothing they can do about interest rates. There's nothing they can do about the level of their currency, because these things are all determined now by the central bankers based in the European Central Bank in Frankfurt. And I put it to you that if you are not able to exercise the most powerful thing that you possess in a democracy, in a free country, namely your ability, not just to hire the people that run your country and make your laws, no, far more important than that, the ability to fire them, the ability to get rid of them, and to replace them with somebody else with a different manifesto. If you cannot change your destiny by the way in which you vote, then all you are left with, if you want change, is civil disobedience, civil disorder, or violence. And that is what we're beginning to see in Greece, and I suspect that as these next few short years go by, that is what we'll begin to see in many other countries in Europe. If you take away from people their democracy, if you take away from people their ability to determine their own futures, you are storing up, far from it being a peaceful and prosperous Europe, you are storing up huge, huge problems for the future. And so if there is one really strong, main, motivating force for me, it is that we must win this battle of democracy over bureaucracy. Now, it's been a difficult road to chart, because those of us that have argued these things back in the 1990s, we were all derided, we were all mad, we were all bad, we were all both. Somehow it was always considered to be a terribly extreme position. And can I just correct one thing in your very kind introduction? You described me as being anti-European. I'm not anti-European. I'm not anti-European. I'm married to a German, I've worked for 2 French companies, and I've drunk more Rioja than most people alive in Britain today. And I recommend that you all do this sort of thing. We are not, in UKIP, anti-European. We don't believe that Sodom and Gomorrah begins at Calais. Far from it. What we love about Europe is the fact that within a very small landmass, we've got all these different languages, all these different cultures, all these different histories. It's actually why Europe as a continent is so very much more interesting than travelling across America. But what is anti-European is to actually try and force all these people into one. I mean, what the Commission want to do is they want to harmonise us. They want to homogenise us. God help us, they even want to pasteurise us. They want to give us a new identity, a new European identity. And that's why we've got that wretched flag. That's why we've got the anthem, which, whenever it's played, I do get up and just walk out. Although I did once sing Land of Hope and Glory quite loud. They didn't like that very much. And it seemed to me that I've been fined so much recently that I can't afford to be fined anymore. but that is what it's all about. That's why we've got a common agricultural policy, a common fisheries policy. It's why we're developing a common energy policy, a common foreign policy, and ultimately a common military policy as well. This is about the building of a new state. And everybody that runs the Labour, Lib Dem and Conservative parties in this country damn well knows it, and they have not ever, ever come clean to the British public about the true intentions of this project. And we should take heart, because it's not just us that's feeling like this. Right across the continent, people are feeling like this. The last poll from an outfit called Eurobarometer, who do the polling for the European Commission, The last poll that was out a few months ago showed that less than 50% of all the people polled across 27 member states, including many countries who are receiving the most incredible sums of money into them, that less than 50% now of people think the EU is a good thing. Think on this. Only 2 countries were given a referendum on whether they should join the euro or not. Denmark and Sweden. And they both said no. Only 1 country was given a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty. That was Ireland. And they said no. Until they were bullied mercilessly into voting yes a second time round. And the poor French and Dutch, who both voted no to the EU constitution, were just cynically, totally ignored by their own governments. Now, I am pretty cheesed off. Not with the European Union particularly, because actually, if you look at the Treaty of Rome, if you listen to Mr. Barroso, if you listen to my mate Rumpy Pumpy, we get on terribly well, believe you me. If you listen to any of these people, actually, they don't hide the truth, because they're talking about the EU becoming a new global superpower. Now, you know, I think it's water mitty stuff. I wonder what they're drinking half the time, and perhaps would like some of it. But at least they're open and honest about it. Though the people that I'm angry with are virtually an entire generation of British politicians who have consistently told a complete, total pack of lies. And I'm sorry to say, none more so than Cast Iron Dave. You know, I give you this cast iron guarantee, he wrote in the Sun newspaper. I'm sure you will take the Sun newspaper. And he said, I give you this cast iron guarantee that if I'm elected Prime Minister, the British people will have a referendum on the treaty. And he hasn't done it, has he? He's been elected as a Prime Minister promising to be a Eurosceptic. Since he's come to power, he has, as I mentioned earlier, given away all regulatory control of Britain's biggest industry. He has, since he came to power, accepted the principle of an EU foreign policy, and he has, since he came to power, agreed that we should shell out yet more of our money. It's now 48 million quid a day is the membership fee that we pay this club, and that we should continue to shell out this money to an organisation whose accounts have not been signed off with the auditors for the last 15 years in a row. I mean, that, I'm afraid, is what Mr. Cameron has done. And much as I, on a personal level, quite like David, he's a very pleasant, nice fella to have a drink with and to be with, he's done what every British Prime Minister, be they Labour or Conservative, have done for the last few years. You know, he's gone along with this emerging EU state, and frankly, he's not to be trusted on this issue. Sometimes people say, well, Nigel, surely, if all the politicians agree, they must be right. You know, I mean, you know, you must be whistling in the wind. Because if all the politicians agree, then, you know, there are a lot of very clever people there, and you must be, and, you know, you've got to have got it wrong. Just remember, folks, this sort of thing has often happened before. Back in the 1930s, and this is an inconvenient truth that very few people like to talk about, but back in the 1930s, all 3 major political parties, the King, for a period of time, virtually the entire British aristocracy, and most certainly the BBC, and every single British newspaper, apart from Beaverbrook, who owned the Express, all of those people thought Hitler was a very good bloke. Now, I mean, I'm sure half of you don't believe me, but I'm being serious with you. They all thought Hitler was a good bloke. You know, Noel Coward made the humorous song, "Don't Let's Be Beastly to the Germans." And what Coward was doing was taking the mickey out of the entire political establishment in Britain. But they all thought Hitler was a good guy, and what we ought to do is turn a blind eye to the fact that he was now building up a German Navy and a German Air Force. And yes, he wasn't being very nice to the Jews, but there's no need to worry about that. Let's just not discuss it. Let's brush it under the carpet. We don't want to cause offence. And of course that was when we had the policy, as you know, of appeasement. But literally the entire political class agreed. And there was only one person who was prepared to make a stand against it and to say that Britain must free up, and to say that Hitler posed the most enormous threat, not just to us, but to the world, and that was Winston Churchill. And Churchill led, in the House of Commons, a small band of about 25 backbench MPs, mostly Conservative, but there were some Labour people in there as well. And they campaigned right through the 1930s to try and expose the flaws of Baldwin's policy, of Chamberlain's policy, of what everybody was saying. And they were derided. They were lampooned. They were described as warmongers, as nutcases, as lunatics. But thankfully, they kept their campaign up. And not long after Munich, the country woke up to the fact that Churchill had a point. If it hadn't been for Churchill and 25 brave souls, we probably wouldn't have had any Spitfires at all in September 1939. Churchill was right, and the entire political establishment was wrong.
To find out more about who we are and what we stand for, go to the UK Independence Party website at www.ukip.org.